You want to stop suffering, but it seems like the chaos just keeps growing, doesn't it? What if I told you that suffering isn't a consequence of chaos, but of how you interpret it? Carl Jung believed there's a secret order behind chaos, and it only reveals itself to those brave enough to look. Perhaps pain is trying to show you something you keep ignoring. In this video, you'll understand why suffering can be a portal, and how stopping suffering doesn't require control, but awareness. How to stop suffering isn't just a question, it's a calling. Are you ready to see beyond? Everyone wants to get rid of pain. That's understandable. But there's a detail almost nobody notices. The more you try to avoid suffering, the more it sticks to you. It's like quicksand. The more you struggle to get out, the deeper you sink. Jung said that what you resist persists. And it's not just a pretty metaphor, it's a profound diagnosis. When you run from pain without understanding it, you're running from your own healing without even knowing it. Most people think suffering is a sign of weakness, failure, that something's wrong. But what if it's exactly the opposite? What if pain is the first sign that something is trying to be born, like a seed that needs to break its shell in the dark before seeing the light? The problem is that we've learned to cover up pain with distractions. Too much work, social media, even that forced, "I'm fine." But pain is stubborn and wise. It keeps coming back until it's heard. Some people only started transforming after a divorce, getting fired, or a panic attack. Not because they wanted to, but because they were pushed to the bottom of the well, and there was nowhere left to hide from themselves. When everything collapses on the outside, what remains is what was ignored on the inside. At this point, chaos seems monstrous, but it holds a message. And it's when we start listening to this message that something surprising happens. When everything falls apart, the mind desperately tries to organize the chaos, find logical explanations, formulas for overcoming. But logic doesn't always solve things, because sometimes what looks like a mess is just the unconscious trying to speak a language that reason does not understand. Jung saw chaos as a symbolic language. Nothing is random. External conflict is a reflection of something already boiling inside, asking to be heard. You know that period when it seems like everything goes wrong at the same time? Relationship in crisis, disrupted sleep, decisions that don't make sense, your whole life off track? It might not be the universe against you, but your psyche trying to reorganize the house inside. Chaos is the cry of a system trying to renew itself, a bit like cleaning. Before it gets clean, everything looks messier. That's why paying attention to symbols is so valuable. A strange dream, a persistent feeling, a spine-tingling déjà vu. These signs speak, but not in English. They speak in the language of the unconscious. Those who begin to listen to this language, even without understanding everything right away, start navigating chaos with less fear, because they realize that what seemed like destruction might just be the beginning of an invisible construction. We have this habit of believing that what we see is absolute truth, but it's not. What the eyes perceive, the brain interprets, and the brain, well, it interprets based on our fears, beliefs, memories, old wounds. The world you see isn't the world as it is. It's the world as you are. And that's why two people can experience the same event and tell completely different stories afterward. The green of trees isn't green. It's how light bounces, the retina translates, and the brain decodes. If you were in another body with another history, you might see a different world. And this applies to everything, from the tone of a conversation to the meaning of a loss. Perception is a lens, and that lens can be scratched, dirty, distorted, without us noticing. So, what's really real? Want to see this in practice? Take a diary and write about a difficult moment. Then, give that account to someone who lived it with you. The chance they'll remember different details is huge. This shows how flawed perception is. But here's the twist. If it's flawed, it can also be refined. And when that begins to happen, chaos doesn't disappear, but it changes shape, changes color, and starts pointing to something bigger. Some things in life look like a mess, but they're choreography. The Fibonacci spiral, for example, appears in shells, galaxies, flowers, and also in the collapses of the soul. It might seem strange to imagine that your identity crisis follows a mathematical formula, but somehow it does. There's a hidden geometry, a secret rhythm operating behind the scenes. And for Jung, this pattern was a clear sign. Even chaos obeys an order that we don't yet understand. When everything seems to be falling apart, maybe it's just reorganizing according to a design we can't see yet. Just as nature doesn't make mistakes in the curves of a fern or the structure of a sunflower, perhaps pain also has a precise architecture. The problem is that we only see fragments and judge too hastily. But time has a curious way of revealing what seemed confusing. It connects the dots, like in a child's drawing, until it forms a picture that makes sense. If this is true, and nature confirms that it is, then maybe you're not out of place. Maybe you're at the exact point of the curve where everything begins to turn. When you understand this, you'll stop fighting against the whirlpool and start dancing with it. And at the center of this spiral, a new kind of intelligence begins to emerge. But before reaching it, life often needs to collapse. Life sometimes seems to crumble before our eyes. What once seemed solid begins to fall apart. Relationships, careers, identities, everything collapses. We commonly hear, "My life has turned into chaos." But what if this isn't a mistake? What if this collapse is exactly what the soul needed to reconfigure itself? Carl Jung reminds us that the psyche, like nature, reorganizes itself from disorder. The caterpillar must stop being who it was to become a butterfly. But this process involves dissolution. Before any rebirth, there's always a small death. Deconstruction comes before reconstruction. And as painful as it may seem, it can be the beginning of something greater, a new level of consciousness, deeper, more authentic. The rational mind tries to prevent this collapse, seeking safety, control, explanations. But the soul doesn't feed on predictability. It feeds on truth. And truth often confronts us with what's poorly positioned within us. When life seems to collapse, maybe we're not losing ground. Maybe we're, for the first time, being invited to touch the real ground, not the illusory floor of the comfort zone, but the invisible foundation where the soul can finally flourish. In these moments, everything out of alignment begins to dissolve. The masks fall off, the roles fade away, and what remains is you, facing the essential question, who am I, now that everything has changed? This question isn't an end, it's a portal. And crossing it requires courage, but it also requires silence, because it's in the silence of chaos that the soul begins to whisper. And it never shouts. It waits for you to listen. When life seems to collapse, it might actually be making room for a more aligned, more conscious, more truthful version of yourself. As the alchemist would say, to be born, one must first die. Don't resist the fall. Use it as a springboard, because sometimes it's only when everything falls apart that we finally understand what really matters. And in that moment, true transformation begins. Everything that irritates you about others reveals something about yourself. That person you judge as arrogant, invasive, or weak might be mirroring parts of yourself that you don't want to see yet. Jung said, everything that is rejected by the self appears in the world as an event. In other words, what you exclude internally projects externally. And then the world becomes a stage for your own shadow, played by others. This projection is an unconscious defense mechanism. Instead of facing your contradictions, you deposit them in others as if they belong to them. This distorts everything. relationships, decisions, how you interpret reality. Anger, discomfort, and even obsession can be clues, not about what the other person is, but about what in you still needs to be seen, accepted, integrated. That's why every irritation can be an opportunity for self-knowledge. The problem isn't out there, it's in what was thrown outside. We can only truly love when we embrace our own complexity, and we can only see others clearly when we clean the internal mirror. Reality changes when we stop projecting our inner war onto the people around us. Life changes, and it changes without asking permission. Alan Watts said, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." There comes a point where resisting no longer makes sense. You get tired of rowing against the current and begin to realize that there's a greater intelligence guiding everything, even if it still seems confusing. Surrender in this context isn't passive resignation, it's active trust. Trusting doesn't mean accepting everything without acting. It means listening, pausing, feeling. It means realizing that not all control is strength. Sometimes true power lies in letting go. Surrendering is like taking a deep breath in the middle of the storm. You're still there, still making choices, but now aligned with something greater than the ego, the soul. Surrender doesn't weaken, it sustains. By releasing control, you open yourself to the flow of life. And it's in this space between what has collapsed and what has not yet been born that the new can emerge. Chaos becomes dance, pain becomes a portal, uncertainty becomes a road. The key is in surrender because it transforms fear into presence, and only the present can truly be lived. The shadow isn't what's wrong with you, it's what was rejected, hidden, suppressed, because at some point someone said it wasn't acceptable. But Jung taught us, what we avoid looking at in ourselves often holds our greatest potential. It's in what you don't want to feel, don't want to remember, don't want to show, that the beginning of healing lies. The shadow is the raw material of transformation. There is no true order that hasn't passed through chaos. Just as gold is extracted from raw clay, your true strength emerges from the parts of you that were denied. Pain reveals where truth is. Mistakes reveal where learning is. And collapse reveals where reconstruction is possible. The order we seek outside begins to form when we face what we hide inside. The darker the tunnel, the stronger the light at the end can be. But this light doesn't come from outside. It's born from the act of illuminating what was forgotten. By integrating the shadow, you stop fighting against yourself. And when that happens, a new inner order begins to manifest. It's not perfection, it's wholeness. And only those who walk through the dark night can see the real brightness of dawn. Jung didn't see suffering as punishment. For him, it was an invitation, a portal to something deeper and transformative. The problem isn't in the pain itself, but in how we face it. Suffering, when accepted and understood, is the key to a new level of consciousness. It's not the absence of pain that makes us grow, but how we deal with it. Pain isn't the end, it's just the beginning of a new inner journey. Jung's great lesson is learning to see pain not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity for transformation. He himself faced moments of great suffering, diving into the chaos of his own psyche. The search for truth about oneself was never easy, but it was in pain that he found the missing light. And this teaches us, pain can be the ladder to reach the next level of self-knowledge. So the next time you encounter suffering, don't run from it. Ask yourself, what is this moment trying to teach me? Suffering is a reflection of something that's being hidden. If you open your eyes to what it brings, you can cross the portal and emerge stronger, wiser. But for that, you need to stop resisting and start looking at pain with a different perspective. The way you see the world changes everything. Chaos, for example, isn't an external force that invades your life. It's your mind's response to what you believe reality to be. If you see chaos as a threat, it will become a nightmare. But if you change your perspective and realize that it's actually a reflection of your psyche, you can begin to understand its true function, to organize. Transformation begins when you alter the way you look. Jung always emphasized that perception shapes reality, and often we ourselves create chaos with our expectations, fears, and resistances. Suffering also feeds on our interpretation of reality. Changing your outlook on life means then changing your relationship with suffering. When you begin to see difficulties as necessary stages for growth, they no longer have the same power over you. Think, for example, about how you view a mistake. For some, it's a failure. For others, an opportunity for learning. This difference in perception can be the key to transforming challenges into steps toward success. The truth is that everything depends on how you look at what happens around you. Change begins with a simple adjustment of focus, and when that happens, chaos becomes not an enemy, but an ally. Pain isn't punishment, it's language, it's an invitation, and it only hurts those who resist it. Suffering is like a mirror, reflecting the part of you that hasn't yet been heard. But what if, instead of running away, you moved closer? What might chaos be trying to reorganize within you? Carl Jung shows us there's a secret order behind chaos, and it only reveals itself when you change your perspective. So I ask you, what inside you is asking to be accepted, not fought against? If this video stirred something in you, if it made sense, if it opened a window somewhere inside, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we dive deep. And if you want to continue this journey, watch the video appearing on screen now. It will show you why your future already exists and what to do with that knowledge.